The ghost couples who baffled investigators. Some stories don't have an ending. They just stop. They fade into a silence so deep it echoes for decades. We like to think that in our modern world, with its constant surveillance and connection, a person can't just cease to exist. But what happens when it's two people? A couple, tied together by love, life, or just habit, who walk out a door, get into a car, and are never seen or heard from again. From a family of 6 that disappeared after a dinner party to partners who vanished on routine drives, their stories are like modern ghost tales. There are no bodies, no wreckage, no ransom notes. They become phantoms, their faces fading from the news into the permanent ink of cold case files. These are the stories of the ghost couples, and they reveal a chilling reality. Sometimes, the world has gaps, and people fall through them, together. The question isn't just where did they go? It's how a shared life, a vehicle, an entire existence can be erased without a single trace. The idyllic life and the unspeakable crime. The community of Great Waters at Reynolds, right on the shores of Lake Oconee, Georgia, is the kind of place you see in retirement brochures. Manicured lawns stretch down to the water, expensive boats bob in private docks, and handsome gates guard the entrance, giving the illusion of total safety. This is where Russell and Shirley Dermond, aged 88 and 87, were living out their golden years in a beautiful million-dollar lakefront home. After nearly 70 years of marriage, they had built a life, raised a family, and were enjoying a quiet, dignified retirement. Russell was a World War II Navy veteran who'd made his fortune in the fast food business, owning a string of successful Hardee's franchises before retiring in 1994. By all accounts, they were private but pleasant people. They had no known enemies, no shady past, and no reason for anyone to wish them harm. Their life was a quiet rhythm of comfort and routine. But in early May of 2014, that peaceful rhythm was shattered. The Dermonds were expected at a neighbor's party to watch the Kentucky Derby, a casual get-together, the kind that filled their social calendar. They never showed up. In a tight-knit community like Great Waters, a no-show was strange. Calls to their home went unanswered. By Tuesday, May 6th, a concerned neighbor went to check on them. She found the front door unlocked and stepped inside, calling their names. The house was pristine, eerily silent. Nothing seemed out of place. But then she opened the door to the 2-car garage and walked into a nightmare. There, on the concrete floor, was the body of 88-year-old Russell Dermond. He had been murdered, and in an act of unthinkable brutality, he had been decapitated. The discovery sent a shockwave of terror through the community. Putnam County Sheriff Howard Sills, a veteran lawman, arrived at what he described as less of a crime scene and more of a chilling, bloody vacuum. Russell's body was on the floor, surrounded by towels, as if someone had tried to stop blood from seeping under the door. But there was very little blood, not nearly enough to suggest the horrific act happened there. And 2 things were terrifyingly absent: Russell Dermond's head and his 87-year-old wife, Shirley. An immediate, frantic search began. The house was immaculate. No forced entry, nothing stolen, no valuables missing. Their cars were in the garage, wallets and purses untouched. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was something else. The initial theory was a kidnapping. The FBI was called in, and for 10 agonizing days, everyone held their breath, praying for Shirley's safe return. On May 16th, that hope was extinguished. 2 fishermen, about 5 or 6 miles from the Dermonds' home, spotted something in the murky water of Lake Oconee. It was Shirley Dermond's body. An autopsy revealed she'd been killed by blunt force trauma to the head. To make sure she sank, her ankles had been tied to 2 30-pound concrete blocks before she was thrown into the lake like trash. The case became one of the most baffling in Georgia's history. Sheriff Sills has called it the most difficult case of his career. The questions just kept piling up. Why were they killed in different ways? Why the extreme, personal violence of decapitation? Investigators believe Russell was likely shot first, with gunshot residue found on his collar. They theorize the decapitation was a calculated move to get rid of the bullet and destroy evidence, a chilling level of forensic awareness. Who would do this? And why? The killers knew the lake, knew where to dump a body to keep it hidden. Sheriff Sills is convinced it wasn't the work of just one person. It was too complex, too controlled. Yet the motive is a complete ghost. With nothing stolen, it wasn't a home invasion. The brutality points to a deep-seated rage, something personal. But the Dermonds had no one in their lives who fit that profile. Their children were cleared. A tragic event from their past, the murder of their son in Atlanta in 2000 during a drug deal, was investigated, but police found no connection. For over a decade, the case has been frozen. The biggest missing piece is, quite literally, Russell Dermond's head, which has never been found. In 2024, a glimmer of hope finally emerged. New forensic testing on clothing from the scene revealed DNA that didn't belong to the Dermonds. Investigators are hopeful this touch DNA could finally lead to a match. But as of today, the killers are still shadows. They slipped into a gated community, committed an unspeakable act of violence against an elderly couple, and vanished, leaving behind nothing but terror and questions that haunt investigators to this day. The vanishing on South Street. Some disappearances are just so complete, they don't make sense. A person is there 1 minute, and the next, they're gone, along with their car, their phone, and their last known movements, completely erased from the world. This is the story of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., a case that for 20 years has been a gaping hole in the heart of Philadelphia. On February 19, 2005, they vanished. Not from some desolate country road, but from one of the city's busiest, most vibrant streets. And it wasn't just two people who disappeared. It was two people in a black 2001 Dodge Dakota pickup truck. In 2 decades, not a single trace of them, or the truck, has ever been found. Danielle, 34, was a single mom to a toddler's son, going through a divorce. Richard, 35, was a dad to a teenage daughter and worked at his family's bakery. They had known each other since high school and had dated on and off. That Saturday night, they met up with friends for drinks at a bar on Philly's iconic South Street. It was a cold night, but the street was alive. Friends said the evening was totally normal. They had a few drinks, and around 11:45 p.m., they decided to leave. They were last seen walking out of the bar, planning to get into Richard's truck. He was going to drive Danielle home to New Jersey before heading back to his place in South Philly. They walked out of the bar and straight into thin air. The next day, the worry started to set in. Danielle was a devoted mom. Her son was her world. When she didn't show up to pick him up, her family knew something was wrong. At the same time, Richard's family was getting worried. His mother knew he was never without his phone. When calls went straight to voicemail, the dread began to build. The investigation started, but there was nowhere to start from. Investigators checked everything. Their credit cards and bank accounts were never touched. Their cell phones went dead shortly after they left the bar and were never turned back on. Security cameras in the area were checked, but with so much traffic and the limited cameras of the time, nothing turned up. Richard's truck, with its Pennsylvania license plate YFH2319, was never seen on any toll bridge cameras leaving the city. It was as if the truck itself had been swallowed by the night. The total lack of evidence became the case's defining feature. There was no crime scene, because nobody knew where a crime even happened. There were no witnesses to a fight or an abduction. This void allowed theories to rush in. The first was a tragic accident. Could Richard have lost control of the truck and plunged into the Delaware or Schuylkill rivers? It was possible. Over the years, dive teams with sonar have repeatedly searched the rivers. They've pulled out dozens of cars, but never Richard's Dodge Dakota. Retired FBI agent Vito Rosselli, who worked the case, finds it highly unlikely. To vanish so completely in a river, with no debris or oil slick ever surfacing, just stretches belief. The second theory, they ran away together. This was immediately shot down by both families. Danielle and Richard were completely devoted to their children. The thought of them abandoning a 1-year-old and a 14-year-old was just unthinkable. They weren't people who would, or could, just walk away. This leaves the third, and most sinister, theory: foul play. From the very beginning, this is what the FBI and the families have believed. The completeness of the disappearance points to something planned and brutally efficient. You had 2 bodies missing. You had a truck missing. No crime scene, Rosselli stated, summing up the impossible challenge. This wasn't a carjacking gone wrong. A stolen truck would have likely been found abandoned. This was an abduction and murder, carried out by someone who knew how to make things disappear. The FBI has officially classified the case as a murder for hire. Tips have pointed in several terrifying directions, from the Italian mafia to a local drug gang. But they were just rumors. None of the tips could ever be backed up with enough evidence to name a suspect. Investigators also looked at Danielle's estranged husband, but again, no solid evidence ever emerged. For 20 years, the case has been a painful, open question in Philadelphia. On the 20th anniversary of their disappearance in February 2025, the FBI confirmed the case is still a priority and reiterated their belief that the couple was murdered. A $15,000 reward for information is still active, but it hasn't been enough to break the wall of silence. The disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. is a uniquely modern horror story. It shows that even on a busy city street, 2 people and a 2-ton truck can be completely erased, leaving their families in a torturous limbo, forever waiting for an answer. The family that drove into nothingness. The idea of a ghost couple is haunting enough, but what about a ghost family? Imagine a father, a mother, and their 4 young children driving away from a gathering, their taillights disappearing in the distance, only to vanish from the face of the earth. This is the story of the Gill family, a case that has baffled Argentina for over 2 decades. On January 13, 2002, in the rural province of Entre Rios, 6 people drove into nothing, leaving behind a home that looked like they were due back any minute. The family was made up of 55-year-old Jose Ruben Gill, his 26-year-old wife Margarita Norma Gallegos, and their 4 kids: 12-year-old Maria Ofelia, 9-year-old Osvaldo Jose, 6-year-old Sofia Mercedes, and 4-year-old Carlos Daniel. They lived and worked on La Candelaria, a huge, remote cattle ranch owned by a man named Alfonso Guet. On the evening of January 12, 2002, the family went to a friend's funeral in the nearby town of Viale. They were seen by others, and everything seemed normal. They left the gathering, presumably to head back to the ranch. They were never seen again. What makes this so bizarre is how long it took for anyone to notice they were gone. It speaks to just how isolated they were that they weren't reported missing for nearly 3 months. When worried relatives finally asked the ranch owner, Alfonso Guet, where they were, he gave a strange explanation. He claimed he'd given Ruben a long vacation and the family had left. A 3-month vacation for a farmhand with no car and no savings? Relatives found it deeply suspicious. When investigators finally got involved, the trail was freezing cold. They went to the family's small home on the ranch and found a scene frozen in time. Food was still on the table. The kids' toys were scattered around. All their belongings, including IDs and what little money they had, were left behind. Margarita's last paycheck was never picked up. The house wasn't packed for a trip. It was a place someone expected to come right back to. The investigation immediately focused on the massive ranch and its owner, Alfonso Get. Relatives told police the relationship between Ruben and his boss was tense. There were allegations of mistreatment, and the Gills had even filed a labor lawsuit against Get. The vacation story seemed like a convenient lie. Over the years, the La Candelaria Ranch was searched many times with dogs, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. In 2008, investigators found traces of human blood near the family's home, but DNA tests didn't match any of the Gills. The famous Argentine forensic anthropology team, known for identifying victims of the country's military dictatorship, was brought in, but even they found nothing. The ranch was just too big. The most common theory is that the family was murdered by someone they knew and their bodies were hidden on the ranch. Alfonso Get was always the main person of interest, though he denied everything. Years later, after Get had died, a contractor came forward with a chilling story. He told police that just before the disappearance, Ruben Gill had complained that Get had ordered him to dig several large, deep pits on a remote part of the ranch for no clear reason. The horrifying implication was that Ruben may have been forced to dig his own family's graves. Other theories have popped up that they ran away or were victims of a criminal group, but none explain why they left everything behind. The case was bogged down by police negligence from the start. The 3-month delay was critical, and the first official search didn't happen for over a year. In 2016, Alfonso Get, the one man who might have had the answers, died in a truck accident, taking any secrets with him to his grave. Today, the disappearance of the Gill family is one of Argentina's most haunting mysteries. A family of 6, erased, leaving behind only an empty house and chilling questions. These cases are more than just stories. They're ongoing mysteries with families still desperately waiting for answers. If you find these investigations as compelling as I do, and believe keeping these stories in the public eye is important, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. You won't want to miss our future episodes as we explore cases that demand a voice. The unsettling pattern. When you look at these cases by themselves, the Dermonds, Imbo, and Petrone, the Gill family, they're each uniquely horrifying. A brutal execution in a rich neighborhood, a city street vanishing act, an entire family wiped off a rural landscape. But when you step back and see them together, a disturbing pattern emerges. It's the pattern of the ghost couple, where two people, tied together in life, are also tied together in their baffling disappearance. It's a pattern that shows up in cold case files all over the world, a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we are, even when we're not alone. These aren't just one-off tragedies. They're part of a bigger, scarier picture. So many of these cases happen in rural or isolated areas, where the lack of witnesses and wide-open spaces make it easy for a crime to go unseen. They often happen during the most mundane moments, a drive home from a bar, a trip to the store, or just being at home. That's what makes it so terrifying. The victims aren't doing anything risky. They're just living their lives when something or someone intervenes. The challenges for investigators are huge and eerily similar across these cases. There's almost never a crime scene. For Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., their truck was the crime scene, and it vanished with them. In the Dermond case, the killers were so clean that the house gave investigators almost nothing to go on. This lack of evidence creates a vacuum where a motive should be. It's rarely robbery, since valuables are often left behind. This points to something more personal, more sinister, but without suspects, the why remains a ghost. And this isn't just a thing of the past. It's still happening. In June 2024, a couple in their 80s, great-great-grandparents with no known enemies, were found shot to death in their home near Sheridan, Michigan. A year later, their deaths are still a complete mystery with no suspects and no motive. Also in August 2024, Stephanie and Daniel Menard, a couple in their 70s, disappeared from a nudist community in California. Their bodies were later found buried under their neighbor's house, victims of blunt force trauma. While a suspect was arrested, the motive remains unclear, with neighbors pointing to a petty feud over a tree. The question isn't just if they died, but why in such a brutal and baffling way. For the families left behind, this limbo is a special kind of torture. It's grief that can't end, an open wound that never heals because there's no closure. Marge Petrone, Richard's mother, has lived for 20 years sure that her son was a victim of foul play, but with no one to hold accountable and no justice. For the children of these victims, Danielle's son, Richard's daughter, the extended Gill family, they inherit a legacy of questions and a loss that's made worse by the mystery. They have to watch as their loved ones become characters in a dark story, their faces staring out from cold case websites. This mystery also leaves a deep scar on the investigators. Cops are problem solvers. A case like the Dermonds or the Imbo Petrone disappearance becomes a career-long obsession. Sheriff Howard Sills and Agent Vito Rosselli have talked about how these cases stick with them, a constant, nagging reminder of a puzzle they couldn't crack. It feels like a personal failure, because they've had to look the families in the eye and admit they can't give them the one thing they need: the truth. The stories of the ghost couples leave us with a deeply unsettling truth. The orderly world we think we live in is a lot thinner than we imagine. They prove that you can be with someone, in your car, in your own home, and still be swallowed by the void. They drove off into the night, walked out of their homes, or left a party, and simply stopped existing. With no wreckage, no witnesses, and no answers, these couples become modern phantoms. Their stories echo the chilling reality that sometimes people can just vanish, leaving behind nothing but a question mark, a question that, for the families and the investigators, never really fades. What do you think happened in these cases? Share your theories in the comments below. Talking about them is one way we keep their memory and the search for answers alive.